Okay, we will now move on to what was originally item number 6
No, it's the regional fire training facility there.
for the East Metro Regional Fire Training
That's-
Facility at 8:05 rather than 7:05.
You're on, Chief.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Real quick, what we like to do tonight is just kind of update you a little bit of where we are on the East Metro Regional Training Facility and to bring you a little bit forward. I think you're all aware the site is located at Highway 120 and 5. The property has been there for about over 40 years that MnDOT has been using. And they've been using it for their ditch fills, they've been using it for parts, and for many years they were using it for their roadkill as well to be put on that site. It's about 28 acres totally in there. A portion of it's owned by Ramsey County, as well as the MnDOT portion of it. We will be getting that property from MnDOT, and our proposal is to put this regional training facility on that site. Basically, what we're looking to do is use about 5 acres of that total site. However, MnDOT, for a short period of time, wants to keep an additional 5 acres available to them to put some of their fill yet on it and some of the things that they need to do until they find another location or don't need to do that any longer. Presently, last week we had the the House tour was out to take a look at the site, and we had the bonding committee there to do it. Monday morning, we had the Senate side bonding committee there to look at it, and what we have done is put a request in to the 2010 bonding bill for $3 million. The total project will cost about $6 million. We will have to match the other $3 million. We're on a good move to get that match. Presently, the land is valued at about $1.8 million, and we are applying for another cleanup grant for Ramsey County between $400,000 and $450,000. So we almost got the 2.2 of the needed $3 million on our end, and we'll be going for other grants. As we move forward in this project, as we go through, we will be having neighborhood meetings to make sure people are up to speed on what it is we are planning to do and so on. One of the things I wanted to just cover real quickly with you is that the facility that we are planning to put there is state-of-the-art. And what I mean by that is, and we've all heard state-of-the-art, in most cases it's only good until the next day when something new comes into place. But for the most part, this has been around, this technology, for a while, and it seems to be doing very well. And what it is, it's propane-driven props. In other words, we'll have burn buildings that we will have there, and actually propane will be pumped into them, and we'll have a fake bed in there that'll look like a bed, and there'll be a control tower, and it can be done one of two ways. Someone in this control tower will actually monitor, and when a firefighter puts enough water onto it, they can slowly reduce the flames and put it out. Another version that we would use is there's actually a pan such underneath it, and when that pan fills up to a certain level, that would indicate that enough water was put on the fire and it will extinguish it. So there's a lot of different props that we'll be using. We'll also be using some live burn fires in there as well. And I know we've had a few people who have asked, my goodness, how much smoke does that generate? And actually, when we do live burn training in these buildings, it's very, very minimal amount of smoke. Because what we do is throw a couple of bales of hay in a room with a couple of pallets, and we let it get large enough so we get some heat, but basically smoke inside of the building, and then we go in and put those out and repeat those 3 or 4 times. We do produce some smoke, but nothing in a huge quantity, nothing like people would see if you were burning a total house down in that kind of a respect. So it will be very limited to the amount of smoke that will be generated out of that facility. We also plan on have some other props there that we need to train with, and we also plan to have a training center, the actual classroom, which would seat about 100 people broken into 3 different classrooms. So it could be used for other things besides just the fire training. We've also talked with the police departments. They would be available to this. Emergency management. This would be a total public safety training location that could be used. The police departments could use it for their SWAT training within the buildings and so on. The only thing that we won't have there is a live range. There will be no firing range at the site. And the reason for that is that, as I think you're well aware, there is one in Washington County. The south end of Maplewood has the one that's run by City of St. Paul Police, and Ramsey County Sheriff's Department down in their law enforcement center just built a brand-new indoor range. And also New Brighton has an underground indoor range as well. For us to add another one really didn't make a lot of good sense with all of those that were in the area. A couple of other things too, just a real note. We have been approached and met with Century College, and they love the partnership with us on their public safety programs. What Century College offers now is a full public safety program for emergency management, emergency medical, as well as firefighter 1, firefighter 2, and then a secondary degree that they offer in fire safety administration. So we are looking to partner with them to make this a bigger part of MNSCU, along with our proposal that we have set forward. I'll let Ron Leaf from SEH, who's been working with us on the environmental side, Ron can give you a little bit more up to date, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that we have. One of the other things, though, I really want to point out is that we have met with, and we've been working with Ron Cockrell from the marshland group that they've had, and we are trying to incorporate what their needs are into our overall plan. Our goal is, as we move forward with this and as the future develops, is to eventually be able to use this for an educational piece where there's some trails that would connect to Oakdale, North St. Paul, and parts of Maplewood, so people could utilize that portion of the area that we wouldn't be utilizing as part of their ease, I guess, to get back in and see the beauty that this area has. One other thing that I'll really point out quickly, and that is part of that marshlands area, our whole goal is to improve the wetland quality as we go forward. I think you're aware that the new wetland buffer has been proposed at 100 feet, and we're proposing to stay with that, and I think we can enhance that compared to the way it is today and even make that water cleaner. Remember, the water that we use in our training is basically St. Paul City water, or it would be North St. Paul, depending on right there. So we're putting very clean water back into the system. The other part of it, and Ron will show you here, is that we're having a big pond that's going to be on the site. The water from the main facility will be draining to that pond area where it'll be held. It'll be able to be slowly leach itself or be able to be drained back into the wetlands as it's cleaned up. And that pond will also provide us for winter training as well as summer training for our water rescue stuff. So there's a huge emphasis that we'll put on this overall program and process that we're going to put on here, not only to clean the environment, but also to help the trail and marshland area, as well as the fire and I would say total public safety training center. Again, I'll answer any questions you have, but otherwise Ron has some more that I think is important for you to hear regarding the environmental side of it. Ron?
Carlin, did you have a question before the chief?
Well, just a clarification on that. You answered the one about the smoke. You said the live burn, so there'd be minimal smoke, and that was one of the issues. But the live fire arms training, so there is no outdoor or indoor range? set
No,
up?
there wouldn't be no indoor or outdoor firing range.
Okay. How about facility buildings on the site?
Yeah, and Ron will show you that here in a minute, and he'll
Okay.
go over what some of those are, yes.
All right, thanks.
Thank you, Steve. Planning Commission, as Steve mentioned, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the site features that you may have heard before from previous proposals on the site, previous work. Some of this work dates back several years, up to 5 years when we first started to look at some of the wetland issues on site. I've got a graphic here that shows some of the wetlands on the overhead camera. We've looked at the wetland situation on the site pretty well. We've got correspondence back from the Corps of Engineers from the Watershed District, pretty well straightened out. The only wetland which is requires that we stay away from and actually do some enhancement, as Steve mentioned, is wetland 1. These other wetlands throughout the site were created as part of MnDOT's grading back in the late 60s, 70s when they started to do some grading for this interchange, which never was ultimately realized. So created wetlands and not something that needs to be mitigated for any impacts to those. That said, one of the key features of some of the previous proposals has been to enhance the wetland functions and values, the wetland quality on site, and that is something that is very much a feature of this site as we move forward to incorporate, as Steve mentioned, some wetland buffer, 100-foot buffer along this north side of the property, and then also to look for additional opportunities to improve the quality of the wetlands that will remain on the site. So the wetland issue has been looked at in some great detail, and things are pretty well sorted out on this part of the project. Another feature that we've looked at is the soil stockpile. Steve mentioned the work that MnDOT has been using the site for over the last 30 to 40 years, stockpiling ditch cleanout material. We recently conducted a phase 1 site investigation as well as a limited phase 2 investigation, which involved some composite sampling of the soils on site. And what we found there, some low-level contamination of some lead and arsenic, things that don't reach any health risk values such that they cause any great concern, but still create some interest in cleaning the site up, and thus the reason for the Ramsey County Environmental Cleanup Fund grant to help remove those soils from the site and take care of that, any concerns that there may be with those contaminants on site. So, soils be taken care of, wetlands. One of the other features of the wetlands, the Marshlands Coalition Group, was really to have connection to the site, not just to the fire training facility, but to the areas surrounding the site and the Ramsey County open space, trail connections, what you see here on this graphic. I've circled a couple of the educational facilities, Hill Murray, we have Maplewood Middle School, Cowan School up here, destinations or locations where educational opportunities to bring people, children into the site, into the open space here, open space to the south of the Priory, open space in Oakdale, which would be east of Highway 5, and also to look at the opportunity for using the site, portions of the site, like the classroom facilities, or as we look at incorporating some of the sustainability features into the site layout as well, just to have that educational opportunity. So those concepts from the Marshlands Group are being brought forward and incorporated into the overall site design. A couple things you also see here on the map, and I'll talk about them in a little more detail on the next graphic, is really one of the key features of the site concept and the site plan will be to incorporate some of these sustainable design guidelines that the city has established as a priority in the recent comprehensive plan. Things like wind energy, solar, or stormwater improvements that follow those sustainable guidelines. Excuse me. And geothermal energy. So those things will be explored in more detail, but very much a part of the process. In fact, kind of looking at establishing a goal, some criteria for obtaining 10 or 20 lead point credits as the site design moves forward. This is a concept of the site, just a layout right now that we've been using to describe what the facility might look like. What you see is this is the 20-acre parcel that Steve mentioned. The site, when we talk about 26 acres, includes this 20-acre parcel plus 6 acres here that extends further to the west. The site itself takes about 5 acres within this site. Another 5 acres is not used, available for future uses, and generally accesses would be off of Century Avenue here. One access point has a few buildings. Building A would be a classroom building where the classroom training would be, has some office storage space, a couple of burn towers or burn building locations, an area for some trench rescue and other confined space type training, and then what's shown as a burn tower and a burn building, and then finally on the far west end of the site, a pond. The pond has dual purpose, opportunities for ice and water rescue training, but also serves the purpose to help with stormwater management and treat some of the water that's managed on the site or produced on the site from rainfall. Finally here, the arrows going around the site here are really to show a circulation pattern that can help the firefighters do some driver training. So again, concept layout, but shows you generally what the features of the site at this point are planned as, and some of the things that are needed to make the facility function for training, but also allow to incorporate some of these sustainable design goals. I think I've covered most of what we wanted to cover on the site layout, site features, so I'll leave it at that, and if Steve wants to add anything.
I guess one last thing I'd like to add, and I probably should have done it at the very beginning, and it's the why. Why do we need this facility? For all practical purposes, there are no facilities on the east side of the metro area. The closest thing that we would have to be available to us would be the City of St. Paul's training facility. You have to remember that when St. Paul built that facility, it was built not for other departments to use it, but for their department to use it. And there are 450 firefighters. That facility gets used quite often, and it's difficult to get into and to be able to use. And again, it was built many, many years ago, so it doesn't have some of the newer state-of-the-art things that we want to incorporate. The other side of that is where it's located as well. This is a regional center between Ramsey and Washington County. Ron has a picture here, but there are 24 fire departments within Washington and Ramsey County that need to train, and there are combination departments and paid per call departments that are available. There's over 1,400 firefighters that will take advantage or have the availability, and that's firefighters only, that would have the availability to use this particular training center. And you have to remember, between Ramsey and Washington County, we service and manage and take care of about 716,000 people through Ramsey and Washington County through the fire service. And so this is very, very important for us to have this site to be able to do our ongoing training. The other issue we run into is a time frame. Most of our training is done in the evening hours. We have a 2 to 2.5 hour window to train in, simply due to the fact of the hours before people get home, how soon we want them to get home before they have to get ready to go to bed to get up for work. And so be able to get to a facility that everything is set up and ready to go will save a huge amount of time and provide that more in training hours than it will in the setup and tear down, and also the driving time. And the map that Ron has put together here, you can see there's a 2 mile, 4, 6, and an 8 mile out. The number of departments that we can cover that can be within 8 miles of this training facility to be able to use and get into the operate. And if we even go out to the 10 mile mark, it even adds many, many more of those sites. Even as far as Marina on the St. Croix has nothing, and that is a long ways out, has nothing anywhere near them to be able to train. And this would be a perfect opportunity for them to even come down on a Saturday and spend 3 or 4 hours. So I just wanted you to be aware of the need and the why we really want this and need to put this training facility where it's at. Yes, sir.
Steve, who will own it and manage it?
Very good question. I missed that too. We're planning on doing it on a joint powers agreement. And so any department that wishes to be a part of this then will have through the JPA, we'll put a portion of dollars into this to keep it ongoing and managed and to keep it ongoing operating costs with it. And that's one of our big goals. We understand that most of these kinds of things, in order to make them go, have to have ongoing funds to keep them going. And we, at this point, plan on putting no city money other than what our budget would be, money type of a thing into it. We're not asking the city to fund any of the ongoing operating expenses. It would all be done through the JPA. The other side of that is if we can partnership, which is looking very, very good with Century College, that's a whole nother avenue through Minskew for money to come in and help fund this and keep it going into the future. So we're really excited about them coming on board, but I'm glad you asked that. It was a great question. Yes, sir.
Well, Chief, you're saying if this facility is never built, are you saying that our firefighters would not be adequately trained?
I wouldn't say they'd be adequately trained. The training would become more and more difficult through the years. We continue to get increases in the work we need to do. The level of where we need to be trained at becomes more and more difficult, and they're harder to find. If you go back 10 years ago, we used to be able to find, even in Maplewood yet, find homes that we could get that they were tearing down, to be able to have them for a month, to burn in them, to train in them, and those kinds of things, and we just don't have those any longer. And actually, it's even getting more and more difficult for the city of Woodbury's, Oakdale, Lake Elmo, and them to even find those kinds of facilities. So our training becomes more difficult. And so what happens is that we have to find other spots, and if we go to St. Paul or if we have to go to Minneapolis, that takes us out of our district considerable ways to get back and provide service. The other side of that is many more cities on the East Metro than the West Metro also provide EMS service of one level or another. So there's no way you can really just take everybody out of the city and not leave it covered, even though there are times we'll ask cities to help us out, so that training becomes more and more difficult. And one of the things for safety-wise is that it's easy to say, well, send a group of 5 or 6 guys or women, firefighters over to train, and then send another group another night. The problem is you don't get to become a cohesive group. It's like in the military. You work together as a group. When you go into the fire, you fight it as a group, and all of those things are very important. So we need to train as a collective group to be able to keep up our skills as well as our safety to be able to do a good job. Chair.
Carolyn?
Do you plan to have any full-time employees at your new site?
Not at this time. I mean, that is something that we'll be looking at as we get forward. We know we're going to need a manager of some type to be able to keep things going, and maybe on a part-time basis. That maybe one of the fire departments may have someone that would do it. We're going to have to schedule it and have a scheduling process. We know we're going to have somebody there to open up at certain times and that. And so that's all part of the next steps, is how we're going to put this together with the JPA.
Okay, and then I've got a follow-up question.
Go right ahead.
What is our duty tonight as far as, are we supposed to make a recommendation or just listen to
This is just an
information?
informational.
Okay,
Strictly informational. As we get farther along, we'll come back to you for more, for your recommendation.
okay, thanks.
One quick question.
Dale?
In the materials, it talks about driver training. What kind of driver training are you involved with?
Each year, what we need to do is take our trucks and we need to do a minimal evasive training course driving. Right now, the only 2 courses that are really available that our trucks can fit on is either up in St. Cloud or the one down in Dakota County. So there really isn't anything on the west side. And what it is if you could look at it, is that there are some stoplights, and you take the big trucks and you learn to turn, you learn to be evasive, and you have to be able to make so many right-hand turns, so many left-hand turns, and be able to stop, back it up, park it, all the kinds of, it's really basic kind of training, but something that we need to do on an ongoing basis each year.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time.